This is Brave New History. We're here with major YouTuber Gnostic Quran. Uh, Gnostic Quran here, as you might know, has over 1,000 YouTube subscribers. So,
I beat it first.
congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And today I wanted to discuss Surah Al-Fatiha. And because I recently did the podcast with a Babi Sheikh, and I think it's good to recall it in the memory.
Yes, indeed. So,
I'm just gonna share them.
here we are.
And this is basically the first verse of the surah. Fatiha itself can be translated as an opening chapter, and several scholars suggest the Syriac etymology for this word, where an analogous word, pitha, as far as I know, as far as I remember, identifies the similar thing
Analogous to what?
to Fatiha.
Oh, okay, got it. Oh, and
Fa-
this here reminds me, we didn't begin the video here by saying Bismillah, so we'll have to
Bismillah.
do that. Yep. All
Yeah,
right.
you always need to do some
Yeah.
formula before the video. It's not even necessary, but I guess. But if you read the Quran, you need always recite A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. It's the sort of a approved classic formula for the Sunnis and Shias.
Yeah. And what does that mean? In the name of God and against Satan, or something like that, or
Yeah, it's A'udhu billahi, I seek refuge in the God mina shaitani rajim, from the Satan, and there is like translation as accursed. It's just a big question because in Sunni tradition, rajim is usually taken as someone being pelted by stones. So the stoning as the legal practice, if we can call it like that, it's the title for that, the term for that would be rajim, and you can translate shaitani rajim as the one who's being pelted by stones, but I think it was just created afterwards in order to sell the audience the specific ritualistic practice and during the Hajj, when you pelt
Mhm.
the pillars which are associated with the shaitan, and you need somehow connect it with the Quran, and you get this. But in
Mhm.
in Mandaeanism, you also have Shtana Rajima, sort of a similar
Mhm.
phrase, but as far as I remember, in like in Mandaic, it just simply denotes someone under the demonic spell or something like that. It's used in the occult practices. In Mandaeanism, this specific phrase. But getting back to the Fatiha, Bismillahi ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The question, of course, what does ar-Rahman ar-Rahim means? Usually, and here's the wrong translation, I guess, most gracious, because of I guess of sort of already established preconceived notion in the ones who created the site, which from which I copied this or print screen this portion of this website, the Corpus Quran. But both of these adjectives are stemming from the Arabic root rahama. And in the first case, we're just adding the noon to the base, Rahman. And that we can connect with a specific pantheon which was already established long before Islam. By that I mean the what's often described as the Rahmani religion of the Yemen, or Rahmani Judaism, where it seems to be that Rahman is sort of a chief deity in the pantheon of this South Yemeni or South Arabian, religion. But what is novatory in the Quran is that it uses the second type of adjective with the addition of ya at the third position, Rahim, which usually taken as a sort of a how is it? Not but I just don't remember the term for that in English. Sorry, but the adjective in its superfluous degree, that it's the most merciful. Well, that sort of a Rahim you won't find anywhere before the Quran in any epigraphic material. But I think that what is often what here this phrase is denoting is the idea of splitting the Godhead into the feminine and masculine part. And this is what you usually see in Shia tafsir tradition, where Rahman stands for the feminine counterpart and Rahim for the masculine. Rahman is usually associated with a Fatima, and Rahim with a Ali. Obviously not in, I think, literal sense, but in more metaphysical one. And for that, we need to, I think, get back to one of the famous Gnostic textual literature, or what we also known as Apocryphon of John, where the first emanation of God is identified with the sort of a syzygy-like deity, both female and male, androgynous sort of a idea of the deity, which you find not only in the ancient Christian Gnosticism, but also in more Eastern traditions, whether it's Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, or Hinduism. And let me just quickly
Yeah,
share
and
the screen.
one question. So there's Fatima, who's Muhammad's daughter, right?
Oh,
Right. And go ahead.
yeah.
And then his cousin-in-law, or
Ali,
what? Ali.
yeah.
And then how are they related within, like, is that like Islamic mysticism that they're related?
I think what is happening, it's either mythologizing the historical figures, or other way around it. There was already pre-existing myth of sort of a divinity being known as a pleroma. There was some sort of metaphysical scheme already in play where there's chief God, the emanations of God, and they're called differently. And then this myth become historicized. It's more evident, this kind of second take on that, it's more evident in more radical Shia early traditions, where it's clear that Muhammad, even Muhammad himself, is not historical person, but sort of a divine light being. That's why you have this preconceived notion in Sufism about Nur Muhammadi, the light of Muhammad, that everything being created through him. So he works like a Christian logos in
Mhm.
that case. But well, the first take, I think the most Muslims would would agree with that. But it's good to speculate. I don't think that there was a sort of one established cosmology. There's always competing ones. And in a specific cosmology I discussed today, I think that was the case. And that is the passage from the Apocryphon of John, where Barbello is the first emanation of goddess, being denoted as mother, father. The first man, the Holy Spirit, androgynous one, male, female. The term for the mother, father in Apocryphon is metropator. And here's the kind of a similar world play is happening because this word in Coptic is not only denoting mother, but the womb. That's why the the barbel itself is identified with a womb, metra. And I think that's important sort of a trace there, because the aforementioned two adjectives, Rahman and Rahim, in the Quran, are stemming from the root Rahma, which in its noun form identified the womb. So let's just simply prove it. Let's go to the Corpus Quran side. Here's our root Rahama, Rahamim. And here in the noun form, we can see that Rahma is used to denote the womb. Here's Arhimin is just the plural noun form, wombs. So I think that's precisely what is happening in the first, at least first verse of the Basmala or Fatiha. There is a big question whether the first verse, this Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, is the part of the chapter itself. Because there is always rivalry traditions, I guess. In Sunni Hadith, you will see that they would ascribe that Ibn Masud, for example, didn't believe in that it was the part of the scripture. In Shia, it's more mainstream opinion that it is the part of the first chapter. But
it is a little bit weird that Allah would open his speech by saying in the name of Allah.
Well, it's if you take it if you go into the Sunni direction, of course, because in Sunni direction it's always weird why Allah will speak with a qul, with a sort of this weird phrases which like another can of worms, but I mean, I don't know how can you reconcile the idea of it's being the direct speech of God. You need to claim that, well, it's direct speech, but Allah make it in this way, that it begins with in the name of Allah, in order to make it easy for the later audience to use it in the prayers, like something like that. You always will have some weird explanation for this, but let's get back to the chapter itself. This is the second verse of the surah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamd, again, from my perspective, problematic ways to apply sort of an Arabic translation, praises. It's usually taken as a praise. Why? Because of the name of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, which is stemming from the same root. That would be just active participle in our case. Well, it's taken as a passive participle. Very, it happens much rarely in Arabic to have such a passive participle from the fourth form, but usually it's taken like Muhammad as the passive participle of the fourth form, meaning the praised one. But obviously it raises some problems because early attestations of the name of the Muhammad from non-Muslim sources are pointing to the different pronunciation. He was pronounced as a Mahmad, not Muhammad. In that case, it's not even Arabic, it's Hebrew. And if you look into the Hebrew, Hamada or Chemot is denoting some sort of a love, cherishable love, or something like that. So correct translation of the prophetic name in that case would be beloved one. And well, if we do apply the same scheme for this alhamd in this verse, that all love then would belong to the God. And lillah, interesting. And here we can have a description of this God, Rabbil Alameen. So our all love belongs to the God who is Rabbil Alameen. Rabbil Alameen, Rab, we can take as identical to the Christian Kurios, which is used everywhere in the New Testament. And yeah, that's a big discussion, I guess, what the Rab mean, why suddenly in New Testament we see that the tetragrammaton Yahweh is not being spelled exactly as it is, but being translated as a kurios, as a Lord. Similarly, you see it in Syriac literature, where the Yahweh is translated as Mar, Lord, and in Arabic, it's got rendered as a Rab. Whether there are some theological problems, it's a big question. But Alamin, and you can see like a sort of a little alif added here, like this kind of a small alif, but it's not being present in early manuscripts. Obviously, it's a later addition. And well, if we do agree with this alif, then probably it's identical to the Hebrew alam, and in that case it will denote worlds. Universe is a more modern kind of understanding being inserted, but Another question, this ending in, because in Arabic in can either denote the plural or dual. So it's gonna be either two worlds or the worlds in plural, or I argue aeons, because same word is being used by various Gnostic sects to denote the aeons, alam, and that fits my assertion that what we are dealing with is some sort of not prayer, because salat, what we usually translate as a prayer from Arabic, it's kind of a more occult practice, as a sort of a recitation, but not dedicated as a kind of a asking from the deity for something, as we usually understand what the prayer is in the Christian context. For that, in Arabic, there is a specific word, dua, when you ask something from the deity. But salah is a more kind of a mantra style, I don't know, not the prayer, but ritualistic practice. It can be identified what we know as dhikr in the Sufi tradition, when you recite specific formula to get state of mind. It's kind of a different from the prayer in that case. And if we do apply this, alamin is the dual, that the Lord of two aeons, as I myself would translate it, then the next passage, which is again reiteration of the first, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, would be the names of these two aeons. In our case, mother, father, or first syzygy, as we can take it as it is. Often you will see that this Rahman is not taken as a usual name of God in the Muslim tradition. It's a very specific name, at least in the Sufi tradition. We can see that, and the other names are kind of a lower in the status of the divine names. And I think it's precisely because this Ar-Rahman is the first type of emanation we are dealing with. And that's fairly the same in the Sethian Gnosticism, whereas Barbelo, mother, father, being identified with the first emanation of the deity. The most closest to this, to the Father, divine Father. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And this is just the first part is from previous, but Malik Yawmiddin, or Malik Yawmiddin. Usually in the Hafs version, which is specific recitation, became dominant in the early 20th century, and now it's like an original version you get from the Quran. It's again with what is called dagger aleph, which is not present in the early manuscripts. If we do agree with the Hafs, then Malik would be the owner, possessor, or master. It would be what is called ism fa'il, active participle. But if we don't agree with the Hafs version that it's Malik or Malik, then it would correspond to the Hebrew Malik, meaning the angel. And I think that's the case. Usually we can see that even aeons are identified with the angels. Yawmiddin, the day of the judgment, but literally, it's worth rendering as a day of debt, not, I guess, in a physical way debt, but more like existential debt, which you owe to the deity through your actions in this world. And Deen is a very ambiguous in Arabic, because the two different etymologies came together. One etymology stemming from the Semitic Deen, which in Hebrew and Syriac means exactly the same, to be indebted. And the second one is stemming from Middle Persian, Diana, or, well, what I spelled as a more Old Persian pronunciation, Diana. In the Middle Persians would be exactly like in Arabic, Deen. Even the term Zen in a Zen Buddhist tradition, it's stemming from the same old Proto-Indo-European stem. And Deen usually denote the religion, but religion not in the modern sense, but sort of a moral compass you have. The sense of morality is identified with this term then. And Dianas are your heavenly counterparts, heavenly twins, divine twins you have, which are being manifested in the afterlife as a sort of amalgamation of your actions in this world. And if you was a good person, your Diana would be a beautiful lady. And that's why some modern scholars would suggest that this sort of a divine virgins which Muslims get in the paradise, it's actually not the virgins, but this sort of a Zoroastrian idea. But if he was a bad person, then Dianas would be like the old hags or something like that. So Yawmiddin, in our case, the Barbello is being sort of an angel which initiate this apocalypse. And you can take it differently, because there is a cyclical tradition in the Muslim world which denies the idea that there's gonna be physical apocalypse. So it's more kind of a reiteration of your personal death. That apocalypse or Qiyamah is usually taken as the death of the person, not the destruction of the universe. But obviously the majority stands that Qiyamah is this classical idea of apocalypse, which you can see in apocalyptic literature all around the late antiquity. So Yawmiddin, Malik Yawmiddin, is our master of the day of judgment, or master of the day of death, or the angel of the day of death. In that case, it's quite evidential that Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim would be this kind of an angel. Iyaka na'bud wa iyaka nasta'in. To you alone we worship, or we serve, as it's more in the Hebrew. Abada is identical to the Hebrew aved, meaning to serve. Wa iyaka nasta'in. And you alone we ask for help. This is very like a kind of rare Semitic. Nasta'in is stemming from awana, and awana is only attested in the what is called epigraphic South Arabian or Old South Arabian, which itself from Yemen, from this Yemenite milieu, Yemenite form of Judaism, whatever it was, right? Because many people would associate the famous two powers in heaven heresy to this type of Judaism. They had the idea of the higher deity and the lower one, but what is interesting that this particular verb is stemming from this geographical locution. You won't find this awana in Hebrew, you won't find it in any other West Semitic languages, in Ge'ez, excuse me, in Ge'ez and in Syriac. So whether there is kind of a, again, duality in place, that this Ibad is for Rahman, but Awana is for the Rahim, I don't know, maybe it's just being done for the preservation of the rhythm of the surah, this kind of a splitting, Iyaka wa Iyaka. But the next, Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim. Ihdina guides us from the Hadu, to guide someone. That's why you have Alazina Hadu in the Quran, the guided ones. Sirat, usually taken as the borrowing from the Syriac strata, which itself stemming from the Latin word strata, meaning the path or the way. I see that problematic because actually in the Quran, you will see that there is actually the word which is probably stemming from this Latin, but it's spelled not with a sod, but with a sheen. So let me just, 1 second, I'm gonna share my screen to prove that. Okay, let's get back to the Corpus Quran. And we need Shin Ra Ta. As you can see, it's used only once in the whole text, but it indicates roughly the same, some sort of indications, markings, which goes with the proposed etymology from Latin. But you can see that it is spelled with a sheen. So in our case, the Sirat in the first chapter not be of the similar etymology, right? Because other way, the Quran would it would testify that the Quran wasn't written at the one place at the one time, because you can see the development of language in that case, that there is the Sirat with a sod, and there is a sort of a similar sharut, but with a sheen. That at the early development of the language, there was a convention to write it with a sod, but later on, it was being implemented with a sheen, and it's being reflected in the Quran itself. But maybe it's not even path; it's maybe something different, right? We just simply need to agree with the Abbasid lexiconary in that case. There is another Latin word, certus, not the strata, but certus. Maybe it's coming from them. It's stemming from this Latin word, meaning something certain. Even this English word certain is stemming from this Latin certus. But I don't know. I'm speaking for myself. I don't know what is behind this word, or is being intended. We can see sort of similar phraseology, this kind of a straight path, mustaqim, straightened. It would be more correct literal translation in Dead Sea Scrolls, as far as I know. But again, I'm skeptical that this particular word denote the path. But it's usually taken as that in the Muslim tradition. So let me just recall. So I had some correspondence with Dr. Samuel Zinner, and he is a specialist in the Semitic religious tradition, especially apocryphal one. And as far as I know, there is the sort of a similar phrase, I mean the straight path, in some apocryphal literature. Let me just find it. The straight path. Here's, for example, and I'm quoting from the second Enoch. Blessed is he who turns back from the changeable path and walks along the straight path. This is straight away from Enochian literature. It's Enoch 42, verse 10. So you can see sort of a similar tradition going on in apocryphal literature.
Yeah, and I wonder about the Didache. They talk about the two paths. No, the two ways.
Two ways, yeah.
And you wonder if there's a relationship, if maybe that could be translated as way as well, in addition to path. So you wonder
if you take it as like sharat. For me, it's enigmatic because, again, etymology doesn't make sense. There is some recitations with a sheen instead of sod, apocryphal one. In Shia Hadith tradition, you will see that they would recite it with a sheen, but it's not established and they are not confirmed by the Quranic material we have. So you won't find in any early Quranic manuscripts such spelling.
Mhm.
And well, that's problematic because the one way is to say it in some hadith, right, which is written 300 years after the Quran, and another way to prove it through the texts we have. And but I myself fairly follow the Enochian identity, because in this particular quotation there is idea that there is a kind of a path of straying ones, the path who are changeable path, right? And that would be, I think, what is implied by Maghdubi alayhi. That's the next passage. Let me just share it. Here, from my perspective as a classical tripartite distinction of anthropos, of the human being and place, which you will find everywhere in early Christianity, not only in Gnosticism. Many, like church father, would say something like that, even among the Eastern Orthodoxy. Until maybe until the 7th century, there's gonna be two rivalry anthropologies, the tripartite and bipartite. Sirat al-Ladhina an'amta alayhim. So it's the description of this Sirat al-Mustaqim, straight path. Basically, the path of those who rely upon alayhi, your favors, ni'mat, or grace. In Safaitic epigraphy, you will see that ni'mat is used not in the literal way, but sometimes in indicating the blessings, because ni'ma literally can be translated some pleasant things, and it's kind of there is again sort of a duality. Sometimes it's used negatively in the Quran, indicating that the people are obsessed with this dunya, with this world, and seeking this nyama of this dunya, the pleasant things of this world. But sometimes it denotes something positive, like as we can see it here, the favors or the blessings of God. And from my perspective, it's a description of first type of the people, the pneumatics. غير مغضوب عليهم, not those who earn the wrath of yours. Again, maghdub, you won't find anything like that before the Quran in any epigraphic material, whether North Arabic or South Arabic. Ghadaba is not being used. But if we do some manipulation with the text, if we do agree of sheer common Semitic ancestry, then it would be identical to the Hebrew atzaba. In that case, that would be ain, sod, ba. So you can see that there is sort of a dots above. And if we remove this dot, that the ghain became ain, and this dot, the letter dot, became sod. And ain identical to the Hebrew ain, sod identical to the Hebrew tzadeh. And well, in Hebrew, atzab is used to denote some harm. And in that case, the translation would be opposite to this one. Alladhina nyamta alayhim, not those who rely upon your grace, but those who rely upon your harm, which you can inflict. I think that's kind of a B implication for that. Or those who harm themselves. Because maghdub in that case is the passive participle. You can see this letter wa is indicating that there is a passive participle. Those who earned the harm, those who harmed, basically. But again, I think that's indication of the second kind of a group, which would be denoting this path, changing path in Yanak. And wala dolin, those not those who are led astray. Usually it's translated like that, but more literal meaning of dalal is to sink away. It's attested in some Safavidic materials. As far as I know, there is some inscription where the person lost his dog, and the loss of the dog is identified with a similar verb, dalal. So when you lose your close relative, be denoted by this verb. And I think that's the description of the third type of the people. And fairly, Quran defends the idea of the tripartite distinction, not only in this chapter, in the Surah Al-Baqiyah, also you can see the idea that peoples are being separated into the three kinds. The Ashabul As-Sabiqun, the forerunners, again, the pneumatics, Ashabul Yamain, those on the left path, on the left path, or the companions of the right, not the left, Yamin, and Ashabul Shimal, those on the left path. And you can see it even in Hindu tradition, right? There is right path movements, Dakshinachara, and there's a left path movements within the Hindu fold, more like a kind of a radical one, the Vamachara. So I think that's fairly my perspective, because usually it's taken as synonymous. The second part, Ad-Dalin, is describing the same people as Maghdubi alayhim. In Shia tradition, in some weird Shia tradition, Maghdubi alayhi, it would be the Abu Bakr, and Wala Da'alin Umar, because, well, they recognize them as archdevils in the Muslim history who opposed Ali, the ones who must be the or the one to whom the originally Prophet Muhammad intended to give the next rulership, but he was stripped away by some plot instigated by Abu Bakr, and that's why Abu Bakr is hated. And but as far as I know, just generally taken as some wicked group in the Sunnism to denote one specific group who are not Ni'mat alayhim. So that's the end of the surah. Surah itself has like seven verses, which maybe again I'm not gonna delve deep into the numerology stuff because I'm not specialist and not myself kind of into all of that gematria, because we don't have actual recitations, right, of the Quran preserved in the manuscriptural evidence. We don't have any dots and harakats, so what's the point talking about the gematria when we can't even agree on what the letters being used? And letters are important to give numerical values. So without knowing what kind of letters intended here, either dot or sot, we can't agree what the number behind the specific word. So saying other way that you will get thousands and thousands of interpretation basically without the dotting systems. And well, it's fair, but don't blame me. I often see this kind of critique. What do you mean? Like, otherwise we can't understand the Quran. Well, you will have different sort of interpretation, but it's not me who was transcribing the Quran into the parchments. Why didn't they put the vocalization marks? Maybe it wasn't intended like that, to have a different interpretation, or maybe Quran wasn't even meant to be circulated in a much broader public, right? As it's taken as universal revelation, even though Quran himself says that it's revealed as the Hukmul Arabiyun, the law of the Arabs. So yeah, that's up for now, I guess.
Yeah, very good. So here, before we go, we've got Dan Hopkins in the chat. And let's see, got some relationship to Buddhism. I didn't know Dan was familiar with Buddhism. I'm just kidding. but Muhammad Mahamatreya is a title Terabintus would have used for the future Buddha. Yeah, I think we mentioned this before. Mateya is the Middle Indic Praktic form Syriac Maitreya or Mithra. I'm getting deja vu. I think we mentioned that previously. And let's see. Dean Damian cognate tame. That's interesting. And yeah, when we were talking about Dean previously, doesn't that just mean religion? Is it like what's the word for two words?
It's usually taken as a religion. There's this famous
Yeah.
passage in the Quran that for you is your deen, but for me is my deen, basically. For you is your religion, but for me is my religion. But
Yeah, that's the shortest surah, isn't it?
no, it's just a passage from the chapter. But you can even translate it in a Semitic fashion. That's for you is your debt, but for me is my debt. That I am responsible for my action, but you're responsible for your action. And but it's problematic to translate because religion term is the Christian term from what from the Protestant Reformation times. It wasn't used even in that sense in antiquity, and you see that in the modern Zoroastrian, the traditional Zoroastrianism, what is called Mazdayasna. They call themselves Verdini. The whole tradition is called Verdin, the right religion or better religion is a more proper translation.
Mm.
You see it in some sort of the forms of Buddhism where the Din is the Zen. It's just the like more Eastern pronunciation of the original Sanskrit, Dhyana. So Dhyana is identical with Dhyana, and Dhyana itself is the mindful practice. You usually see that the meditations in the Hinduism are or hold this kind of a corpus, what we know as meditations are being referred as dhyana, different mantras or all these mind practices. And so it's kind of a moral compass, I think, what is intended overall in the Quran is sort of a moral sense, moral responsibility. It's called deen, and it was done intentionally, I think, to unite with the Hebrew, and that's the big question: whether the Semitic root itself may be stemming from the Persian, but I think they're separate. They are not even related to each other. And in Arabic, it just became blended together into one, confused maybe, but maybe intentionally confused to show that, well, this debt, this day of judgment is associated with the moral sense. And you get just the one term denoting two different terms, which itself stemming from the two completely different etymologies, which is fascinating to see. Sort of that type of syncretism, I would say. And the Quran is definitely a syncretic book. And well, guess what was the religion before the Islam, which is deemed to be super syncretic? Manichaeanism. You won't see that kind of a vigor to be syncretic in Judaic traditions or Christianity. They usually tend to be more isolationist, trying to defend their own oral tradition and not allowed to mix it with the other ones. Whilst the Mani himself was very open to amalgamate very type of different tradition into the one. Yeah, surely they had sort of a skeleton of the basic cosmology, but you can apply different pantheon to this skeleton. Whether it's more Eastern type of Manichaeism, where you can see the Buddhas being everywhere, or like Persianate, where you see that the Mithra appears, the Sraosh appears, kind of a different Manichaean pantheon. So not the Manichaean, Zoroastrian pantheon. And I see it in the Quran, to be honest. It's very syncretic. It's the soup of different traditions. That's why it's so problematic to study, because Mandean parallels, Manichaean parallels, Gnostic parallels, this Talmudic tradition parallels, like everyone bundled together into one somehow. But yeah.
Yeah. All right, and maybe here before we go, take a few more comments and questions here, if that's all right. And let's see. Dharma. Oh, we're all from Dan.
No,
Is it-
dharma is different. It's dharma is usually, it's like duty is the sort of a moral obligation which
mhm,
you need to follow in order to achieve salvation in the Hinduism. Dharma is an important part of the Hindu. That's why they have this idea of varna ashrama dharma, the ideal type of a behavior. There's the varnas, which is usually translated into English as the castes, caste systems, but in Hinduism it's called varnas. So every person born in with inherited type of abilities of which he capable of. That's why there's a four type of peoples: the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, the or Vaishyus and Shudras. The Brahmins is the priestly class, the Kshatriyas is the warrior class or the class of the rulers, Vaishyus the merchants, and the Shudras just the plebeians who, who do all the bad, dirty stuff. Yeah, and for each of them, there is different dharmas they need to attain in order to progress to the higher realms, because Kshatri is being reborn into Brahmin in the next life if he was successful in his own dharma, and the Brahmin as being like released. I don't know what is the term in the Hinduism, the moksha, right? Not the nirvana, but moksha, that he is being released from this lower realm into the higher one and being reborn in the more higher worlds, higher lokas. But dharma is not the dhyana. It's two different words or terms.
yeah, absolutely. And then we have origin in Contracelsus. Refers to the potent names used by Egyptian sages, Persian magi, and Brahmin signify deities in the Septuagint. I did not know that. That's interesting.
Again, Celsius refers to the potent names.
Well, that's interesting.
Well, there's a lot of Indian stuff in Gnostic materials, when they would have like a sort of a meditative recitation inserted like in the middle of the text, like
Mhm.
Om,
Yeah.
you will see it. But getting back to the news that the statue of
Mhm.
Buddha was recovered in the Egypt, if I had it.
Yeah, Dan has been vindicated. Everything is Buddhist. And
Well, I myself won't deny that there was a Buddhist influence on Gnosticism. I think it's just
yep,
without a doubt,
yep.
from my perspective.
And they
Just
found Buddha statues at Al-Aqsa. I just made that up right now, but
it's
um,
it's Berenice. It's one of the kind of a port cities in northern Africa, in Egypt. Just one second. Here's the statue, by the way, which they found. It's most probably statue itself was produced in Alexandria because they had the workers there. The statue itself is Greco-Buddhist, at least belonging to the artistic style of the Greco-Buddhism, because of how the hair was produced. But what is interesting is this nimbus behind the
mhm.
head of the Buddha, which fairly reminds us the nimbus. We can see solar kind of a representation behind the Mithraic statues and the statues of the Sol Invictus.
Yeah.
So there is a sense of syncretism here.
Yeah, I think they also like those things go way back. Like the earliest depictions of Ganesh, I think have those. But yeah, that does remind me of Sol Invictus. He's in the corner looking at Mithras while he's slaying the bull.
Yeah, and if I can find it too, there's just because the map of this port is very close to where supposedly Islam was originated, right? Hijaz. Yeah, here it is. It's just a modern map, but it will serve the purpose in order to show you where it was located. Just 1 second. Doesn't share. Here it is. Here you can see the Port Berenice. And here's the Medina. So they definitely had some trade with this sort of a shore, because there's also was a trade route. The major trade route was by sea, but this famous trade route upon which Muhammad was walking, it was going through the Medina by this kind of a eastern shore. So, and they also had some connection with the Yemen. It's interesting. Like, fascinating to find the Buddha statue here. Like, what the hell is even going on? I would be suggesting that the statue would be like in much further north, like in the Greek domain, but just yeah.
It's a crazy
So
world.
I think there was a sort of a local population of the Hindus who traveled from India. Like, how would you explain it otherwise? Like traders from India, which will eventually bring their own religious tradition.
Yeah. Yes. All right, so maybe we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
And let's see. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations again on getting your first 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
And
You will congratulate me on my next thousands.
yeah, well, probably then. I mean, first 1,000 is the easiest, so maybe we'll do congratulations again at 10,000. No, I mean every
No.
step. Like every week that goes by. Like next week you'll have 2,000, then you'll have 3. But yeah.
It's like in cartoon movies, 10 years later, and there's
Yep. SpongeBob. 10 years.
yeah, spider webs everywhere. Well,
absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, and thank you everybody for watching, and have a great day.
Bye.